Naram namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatyam vasam tato jayodiraya nashna prayasho bhadreshu nityam bhagata sevaya bhagati uttamashoki bhaktir bhavati naishtaki nigamal kapurugaritam param shukamukaram nitravishamitam pibata bhagatam rashamarayam mahora horasika vibhagam Krishna sadam bhagate dhammagini he karonashta drishamasho panana kodunodidam Twamapi adabhishuta vishutam vibhu samapyarene abhiram viruksaram prakyahidhurmaharam sankleshanavanamu santi nanyataham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantara Kantanamostute Jayatam Sarito Pango Mama Maner Matirgati Matsavasha Padambo Jaradanamadanamohanam Seeman Rasarasaram Vamsi Pada Karsan Vana Shanobika Gopinada Sri Estaraham Divyad Vrindarani Kapadrumada Srimad Radnagara Shima Sanasto Sri Sri Radha Shidagovida Prasadevi Shevi Mano Shmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chadikari Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Rajajam Mangalam Panidi Kaksho Mangadaya Tanohari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahadevi Vidmahi Vishnu Pandita Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Sare Sri Hari Pare Namastubhyam Namastubhyam Yadire Tapte Kanchana Gonagi Radhi Vindavaneshwari Vishavanasuteri Vipranamani Hari Pre Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Good morning, Rob. Thanks for joining me on Zoom, and thanks for the joinees so far on Facebook. Anjali from Phoenix, John Malik, Salt Lake City, Brent, South Jordan, Shali Shirley from Ephraim. Thanks to all of you for jumping on board this Motivational Monday. In case you're unaware, last Saturday, Radhika Raman, an amazingly realized devotee and a highly accomplished scholar, gave the talk in Salt Lake City. I listened to some of it on Facebook. Rob tells me about 150 people came to get blessed, to get showered by the nectarine words tumbling, cascading from his lotus mouth. And not only did we have a landmark event last Saturday with Radhika Maran, but next Saturday is Diwali / Govardhan Puja. Starts at 6 o'clock at the Salt Lake campus. There'll be a Govardhan Hill. There'll be offering of as many cooked preparations as possible called Anakut, which means literally a mountain of food. There'll be the lighting of lamps and the making of wishes for the new year. There'll be entertainment. There'll be dancing, lots and lots of kirtan. There'll be hot meals for sale, fireworks, and Garba, the Gujarati folk dancing, which is very easy to pick up. Anyone can get up to speed in just a few moments. So free of charge. The only cost is if you want to buy a 5-6 course hot meal, there's a charge. Other than that, there's no admission fee. That's this Saturday in Mill Creek at the Salt Lake City Temple, beginning from 6 p.m. And also I'm picking up Janardhan at the airport. He's going to stay with me for a week. We're going to work on some recordings, some new songs for the Festival of Colors in 2024. And he'll also be performing next Saturday at the Diwali Festival and leading the Arti, I think, if that's okay with Govinda Dev, who is our kirtan arranger, kirtan organizer. We'll start off this week in the best way that you can start off. A quote from the great Mahajan, one of the 12 main authorities on the practice of Krishna consciousness. His name is Prahlad Maharaj. He says, Tatsadu mane suryavari nena sada samadbigdi yamashadgara idbadmagdidam griyamanda kupam vanangatan yadari mashayitam. He starts off by speaking very negatively about family and householder life. But at the same time, we're going to jump right in there in our preface to this morning's discussion and point out that Prahlad himself was married. He had a wife, he had children, and yet he talks about married life, at least with extremely cautionary words. He says, Hitbat Magatam Griam Andakupam. He advises his father. Now, his father is married also and has a kingdom, has businesses, has land, has dependents, has constituents. But his father has allowed all of that to get under his skin. He's become conditioned by the power, by the influence, by the deference which people owe him, by the leverage that he has. If you don't know it already, Hiranyakashipu marshaled hordes of demons who roared up from the lower planets. They fought the demigods. They defeated the demigods. They took over the demigods' palatial residences in the heavenly planet, and Hiranyakashipu sat himself on the throne of Indra. And as the proxy for Indra, he arranged for rainfall, he arranged for seasonal change, he arranged for crops to grow. He was so powerful that he was able to, in the absence of Indra, make sure that all the natural occurrences within the universe occurred on schedule. And yet, not surprisingly, because the material world, although it's temporary and it's full of darkness and ignorance and has so many things about it which are inferior to the eternal self-indulgent spiritual world, nevertheless, nobody can deny the material world is in an incredibly engaging places. Hiranyakashipu started out as a young idealist. He had no family, he had no position. He wanted to improve himself. We all have a desire to improve ourselves. And so he went off and he did austerities, he did yoga, stood on one leg, merged his in-breathing and out-breathing for 1,000 years by the calculation of the demigods. And as a result of that, Lord Brahma came before him, and Lord Brahma, as the creator of the universe, gave him a position. He gave him blessings from which a wife came, a son came, kingdom came, sovereignty came, armies came, followers came. And in all of that, he went from being a basically renounced idealist to a extremely attached, power-hungry, despotic tyrant. And that's pretty much always the case. Material nature is so clever. She just gets a little foot in the door and then a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. If you've ever ridden on the subways in Bombay, they're packed. They're packed. And if you're lucky enough to have gotten a seat, you probably won't have it for very long because, at the next stop, a poor mother with a bunch of kids gets on and she looks at you with such longing and at the same time accusation. Why are you, a young male, getting a seat when I, a poor lady with no money and all these kids? And she'll go like this, like, can I just get an inch? Can I just get 2 inches? So you can't sit there stone-hearted and not give a lady a couple of inches to squeeze in beside you. But before you know it, she's in there, her first kid is in there, her second kid is in there, and then you're out on the floor. They know how to take an inch and get an inch and start it with an inch and get a mile, go in like a needle and come out like a plow. So Maya Dayato Bisham Pumsham Sangachaya Sangatsanjaya Kama Krota Bijayate. One thinks it would be nice to organize things better. One sees oneself as having the God-given talents and abilities to organize things better. One does the austerity, pays one's dues, gets the position, the enhanced leverage in order to actually make things better. People start giving him feedback. You and you alone had caused improvements that no one else was able to bring about. And on the basis of that uncontested track record, you then go on to make more and more and more improvements. And your feedback gets more and more and more flattering that you and only you are the one, you're our savior. Nobody else can do what you can do. And after a while, you start believing it. And then you become fully ensnared within the clutches of Maya. You actually believe that aside from you, everything is just going to go south. Everything's going to go back to hell. So you start oppressing, persecuting, eliminating, jailing anyone who has an opposite or contending opinion. You empower the military, you empower the police in order to get uncontested power. It's trite to say, but completely true. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Even Hiranyakashipu, our archetypical demon, started out as an idealistic young man who just wanted to improve things, but he ended up being extremely, maddeningly attached to all the trappings that came with his position. Nonam pramata kurute karma yat indriya pritai apnoti nasaramaneyataram ashana bhakeshadasharam. Elsewhere, Prahlad Maharaj says, Nonam pramata. In this way, one becomes maddened, kurute karma, by the latitude that one is given. No one calls you to task. No one chastises you. No one corrects you. People bite their tongue. They end up trembling in fear of you. You surround yourself not by thinking people, innovative people, creative people. You surround yourself by sycophants, yes men. And then there are no restraints. You feel like you're entitled to do anything and everything, just like Gajendra. Gajendra had no one to oppose him. In his early life, there might have been some competitive male elephants, but after a fight or two, they gave up, ran away with their tails between their legs. And it had been a long time since Gajendra had anybody say boo to him, contest anything that he said. And he had this feeling of entitlement. So much so that when, with his big mountain-like body, he went through the jungle, he uprooting trees and throwing them off to the right and throwing them to the left, and undoubtedly trampling the smaller animals, the rodents, the insects, the spiders, and the little caterpillars, giving not a thought to the misery that he might have been inflicting on who he considered lesser living beings. Same thing always happens. It's a trajectory which Maya has used successfully to great effect over and over and over and over again. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says, Tat sadhumane suryavayidenam sada samadvidhyam ashadgarat. As soon as you start on this ladder of ascendancy and you start eliminating the competition and consolidating your power, there's so many anxieties because opposition, danger can come from unexpectedly from any one of the compass points. The compass points in Vedic culture are not 4, but there are 10. There's north, south, east, and west, and there's north, northeast, north, northwest, south, southwest, and there are on the plane, on the flat horizontal plane, there are 8, and then there's up, and then there's down. Trouble can come from any direction in the most unexpected way. It had been a long time. Gajendra couldn't even remember the last time that anybody went up against him, even verbally, even mentally. I remember one time after Prabhupada left the planet, there was a phenomenon called zonal gurus, where some of my god brothers ascended to the position of gurus. And it wasn't long before the power had gone to some of their heads. And I remember one time in Berkeley, I'd been the president for 3 years. We had great success. But overnight, so-called guru came in and initiated 30 people, and all the loyalty shifted from me to this newcomer. And I remember I was expected to do the puja to the newcomer as he sat on his Vyasasan. So I offered the incense, I offered the flame. Later on, one of the devotees who had been my right-hand man, in fact, he came up to me and he said, "True, I'm not sure I like your attitude." I was the one who had been uncontested for 3 years. So I was shocked. I was taken aback. I was dismayed. I hadn't been used to being talked to that way. So I said, trying to control myself as much as I could, what do you mean? He says, I'm not sure I like the way you offered Arti to my guru. So I'm still trying to feel him out, see where he's coming from. Well, I offered you incense. Did I miss anything out? What? He said, no, you did it properly, but there just wasn't a look of sufficient respect in your eyes. I said, well, I think you got me there. Guilty as charged. So similarly with Gajendra, he couldn't even remember a time when even mentally, because when you're thinking negatively in your mind, it's going to show in your eyes. If someone's really looking at your eyes, it's hard to you can fool people with your words, you can fool people with your body language, but you can hardly ever fool people with your eyes. If they look deeply into your eyes, they'll see where you're coming from. And so it had been such a long time since Gajendra had seen anything, even in people's eyes, except unmitigated adulation and respect, that he had forgotten that anything had come against him. And he'd gotten soft, he'd gotten unprepared, he'd lost his skills. And that's when, from any of the 10 directions, the crocodile can come. In this material world, on the rise to name and fame, to prominence, there are so many different miseries, so many different anxieties that can come to us from so many different directions. And all we're doing, yes, you might be getting a bigger house with more bedrooms. You might be getting a more expensive car like a Mercedes or a BMW. You might be able to afford, have more kids, more money in the bank. But the more in terms of money and kids and influence and resident transportation, it comes with a price, and the price is anxiety. Price is anxiety, that unexpectedly all these things can be threatened, challenged, and whisked away. Prahlad again gives us a tidbit of wisdom in the 7th canto. Rajitas churatotata shrajanat pashubhakti artivi kadatam nitya pranad badabhya. What is the sum total? What is the result of getting more prominence in this material world in terms of family, kids, grandkids, land, businesses, wealth, and position? Rajatash, the first anxiety is from the king, or in a democracy, the government. The government is always trying to get taxes to support their projects. Rich people in America are particularly vigilant. They figure they've worked hard to earn their money and they don't want to give it up to the government. And they pretty much have the means to find loopholes in the tax laws with their batteries of lawyers in order to not pay taxes. The middle and lower class workers pay a higher percentage of taxes than the fabulously wealthy because they don't have the lawyers and the CPAs on their payroll to find the loopholes. So in America, the rich people, the entitled people, the haves, pay a lower percentage of taxes than any other country in the world. They're full of anxiety that some or other the government may take away a percentage of their wealth. Rajatash turato shatu shwajanat chachu chakshabi. Then the relatives. The rich man had better live forever because, just like jackals biting at the heels of a lion, the relatives are waiting for that rich man to pass away so that they can rush in to enjoy the booty. They can rush in to claim their inheritance, and without having done any work or paid any dues, without having had any other merit than just being born as the sons and grandsons of the rich man, they get to live an opulent life full of sense gratification. Rajatash shrajanat. So shrajanat means one fears the government, one fears one's relatives,
one fears animals, at least in India. Anything shiny like gold and jewels, you better have a really good place to hide it, because monkeys and other animals, they're very expert in breaking and entering and B&E. They know where most people keep the jewelry boxes, and they know how to open the jewelry box, and they know how to steal. So even animals are fearful. And of course, if you're hiking in the backcountry, animals like grizzly bears and mountain lions are also, and snakes, poison snakes are there. They can take your life and thus separate you from all of your opulence. And then the kicker is, not only do you have to be full of anxiety about family members, about the government, about thieves. Thieves are always planning. And nowadays, thievery is so, it used to be that you just got good locks and you were able to close your windows, or you had a good safe. That used to be enough. But now there's so many different ways of stealing. You can steal in the internet. Someone can get your password, your username, hack into your account. They can clean out your bank accounts. And when you go to the bank for restitution, the bank says, well, you should have kept your password more secretly. It's your fault. We're not responsible. We're not going to give you your money back. In this way, in a finger snap by a computer key, your hard-earned wealth can be taken away. Thieves, government, relatives, animals. But the worst thing, the kicker is, one cannot even trust oneself. One cannot even trust one's self. Where did I put that key? Where did I write down that password? One's always, it's like when you're away on vacation in Cancun, all the wife can think about was, did I turn the oven off back home? She can't enjoy the beach, the surf, the sand, the sun, the daiquiris, because she's only thinking, did I remember to turn the oven off back home? So the worst thing about the path of material advancement, which comes along with so much anxiety and so much attachment, should one not be doing this in Krishna consciousness, the worst thing is that one cannot even trust oneself. One has that boom moments. Did I remember to put the keys in a safe place? Did I remember to hide my password? Did I remember to lock the door to my office that no one can get in and get onto my computer? Did I remember? And I remember. And there are people who are willing to exploit such lapses. By Bobby and I went to Houston a couple of weeks ago, and we have a lot of people here. We have a lot of live-in volunteers. We have a lot of people do community service, court-appointed. Most of the court-appointed people, it's just for minor crimes like exceeding the speed limit, or younger people can be ordered to do community service if they're too truant, if they miss too many classes in school. Most of these are minor things, and we don't really get to know what the offense is. It's not like when a volunteer arrives, it's in good taste to say, well, what was your crime? And they're not obliged to tell you the truth, even if you are so pointed as to ask. And most of the people are great. We get a lot of mileage out of the community service volunteers. Some of them are very qualified. We had a bunch of guys who all came together as a group, originally from Mexico, and they were skilled workers, and they did about $5,000 worth of work on our pavilion, our performing arts pavilion, with some flashing around the edge to keep the birds from crawling in and making their nests. And that was just cost of materials. But if someone's a thief, we wouldn't know about it. If we knew about it, we wouldn't have them on the property. But they're here working. They go to the house, they go here and there, and they know the layout. And so when we were in Houston, all of our rooms were broken into, the locks were broken. Nothing seemed to have been stolen. But this is the downside of making material advancement, being aggressive, getting prominence over one's peers. The downside is that one is full of anxieties from so many different directions. Just like Gajendra, he was off his guard. He had gotten soft over the years. Yeah, he started to think of himself as immune from attack. And so he was completely shocked to his very core when within the water, the crocodile with great force. We can imagine the croc didn't just delicately clamp his jaws around the leg of the crocodile. We can imagine he hit that leg like as if you grabbed onto a power transformer and you had 30,000 bolts run through you at the same moment. There wasn't just the grabbing action, but he was obviously moving very fast through the water, and he hit that elephant's leg with great force and great velocity, and must have literally shocked him, sent the equivalent of an electric shock of thousands and thousands of bolts through that elephant. So therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says, Hitbam gatam griyamanda kupam. It's better to avoid householder life. If you're going to get attached, if you have no hedge against attachment and anxiety, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to live a life of hypertension and stress like that? Better to give it up and go to the forest. If your senses are out of control, if you have no compass, if you have no anchor, if you have no higher purpose in life, no idea of fidelity to the Lord, your creator, who gave you those talents and abilities in the first place. And if you're not interested in acknowledging and honoring him by using those talents and abilities in a God-centered way, then Prahlad Maharaj says, you'd be better off going to the forest than expanding your influence and catering to your ambitious desires by attaching yourself to a woman, and then from that woman having children and then grandchildren and land and businesses and all like that. It says better to go in the forest, because for such a person who has that inclination towards attachment, householder life is anda kupam. Anda kupam means a covered well in the forest. Householder life, it presents the same level of danger as a covered well in the forest. What's a covered well in the forest? Well, it's covered. And it's probably covered with nice soft grasses. Probably looks like a very inviting place. You're walking through the forest, you're tired, you're miserable, you're thirsty, and you just want to sit down for a moment to get your energy back. So you say, oh, here's a nice, in fact, the area, the hole which is covered probably is covered in such an artful way that it looks more inviting than the rest of the forest in general. So your attention is drawn to that covered hole. You think, oh, this is a nice soft place to sit. There are nice soft grasses. Let me just relax and sit here. Let me enjoy this moment for just a minute or two. And then one sits, but it's just the covering of the well. So no sooner does one lower one's weight onto that canopy than it collapses, and one finds oneself tumbling into the dark, head over heels, and landing, splashing in the bottom of a well. Now the well is dried up. One was already thirsty, and being at the bottom of a dried up well does nothing to slake one's thirst, because it's dark and there's no sunlight. There are lots of cobwebs created by spiders, some of whom are poisonous. There might be scorpions down there. There could very well be snakes to bite oneself. The walls are sheer. There are no handholds. There's no rope or life-saving mechanism lowered from the top. There's no one to hear your cries. You're in a remote part of the forest. And however much you cry, there's no one who actually is going to come. There's no one who cares. It's a dead end. If you, without a background or without a plan to engage yourself and your family members and your wealth in the service of the Lord, you're going to be comparable to a person that falls into a dark well in the middle of the forest. Now, in household life, you might be surrounded by children who make very pleasing sounds, by a wife who speaks alluringly and softly, by business associates who defer to your wisdom and defer to your management position. And yet at the same time, Prahlad says this is like a well in the darkness of the forest, because inside you may be feeling despair. Inside you may be feeling shackled. You may be feeling trapped. But however you turn to the right or to the left, to your wife or to your kinsmen or to your friends or your business, so nobody cares. Nobody wants to give voice to the despair, the desperation, the depression, which is at the root of a non-God-centered life. What is the point? We are created to honor God. We are created to be men and women of excellence, to use our talents and abilities in order to serve the Lord and to engage those who are close to us in the devotional service of the Lord. We ignore that at our own peril. We may not have committed any sins. We may not have given way to temptation in an explicit way. But if we miss the opportunity to use what God has given us and to engage the people whom God has sent into our life in his service, we're just going to go through life feeling more and more anxious, more and more guilty, more and more depressed, and above and beyond everything else, more and more full of anxiety. There isn't anyone who's unfamiliar with the term midlife crisis. When you get to the point that more of your life is behind you and less of your life is before you, and you haven't done anything in the way of God consciousness, and your faculties are now waning, your family member is a little less keen on you now that you're older, now that you're less active, now that you're over the edge on the downward slope, the family is not quite as affectionate to you as they were before. And you feel panic, you feel desperate, and above and beyond, you feel alone. This is Gajendra. This is Gajendra. Through this tug of war with the croc, Gajendra realized he was losing the fight to stay upright. He was being dragged further from the shore, nagged by the reptile, and his strength was flagging day by day. Lacking the backing of the other pachyderms, Gajendra was quite alone in this danger zone. The water had turned to foam, his friends had flown, and there was no one to phone. He was at the end of his fabled strength. He was devoid of his fabled strength. He was at the end of his rope's length, and his hopes turned to the Lord, who awards protection for his devotees. He gave up tugging on his leg, which the croc wanted to devour, and with his trunk he plucked from the muck of the lake a lotus flower and offered it to the Lord, seeking the Lord's power. What's happening here? Gajendra's past history as a devotee in his previous life as Indradu Maharaj, in this life and death situation, is now coming to the surface. Krishna loves us too much to let us continue in household life, continue towards the brink, the precipice of death. He doesn't want us to face death, not having done anything profitable with our lives. So when he sees that we're not going to take up the mantle, resume the process in and of and by ourselves, Krishna may very well orchestrate a life-threatening situation in the middle of which anyone we turn to, anyone we look to, is unable or unwilling to come to our aid. Though we may have invested our whole life to serve our wife, our spouse, our family, our business, and we may have spent the lion's share of our money. We worked hard to make money, but we ourselves ate 2 modest meals, 3 meals a day, drove a simple car. The lion's share of money went to the wives and the children and into the business. And yet when we are in mortal danger and we look around, like Gajendra looked around at his wives, his children, the other male elephants, there was nothing they could do to help him. So in that desperate situation, with no other crutch to lean on, with no one else who's going to throw him a lifeline, now, the remembrance of his previous history as a devotee starts to come to the surface. So in all the danger, in all the shock, in all the anxiety, and in all the desperation, we see the remote hand of Krishna at work. The immediacy is that his life is threatened, everything he's worked for is going to ruin. He's being separated from his loved ones, plucked out of the midst of his family circle to whom he counted on for protection. His whole world is rocked. It's like an earthquake. It's like a force of nature, a volcano. That's the immediate situation. Shocking, unfair, and yet the remote cause is Krishna, who loves us too much to let us rot in householder life. And therefore, Prahlad Maharaj advises his father. Prahlad Maharaj is the mouthpiece of the Lord. It may seem like what Prahlad suggests to Hiranyakashipu is the worst thing. It's the last thing. It may seem like what Prahlad Maharaj is suggesting is what an enemy would suggest to his enemy. At least it seems that way from Hiranyakashipu, because he sees household life as all in all. He's devoid of transcendental knowledge. But the fact is that Prahlad is his best friend, not his wife, not his not Prahlad's stepbrothers, not his counselors, not his advisors, not his generals, not his prime minister, not his accountant, not his queens. No, they're all encouraging him in illusion. Only Prahlad is telling him the truth. Only Prahlad is his well-wisher. Prahlad says, Andukupam, Vanangato Yadarimashai. Says, Father, in order to bring down the temperature, normal temperature is 98.6. We need some temperature in the body. We can't do without temperature. 98.6 is the optimal temperature. But if someone thinks, oh, 98.6 is good, 103 will be better, that's a fatal mistake. That's a formula for death. So Hiranyakashipu is someone who calculates in this misdirected way. He thinks if transportation, if a roof, if food is good, then more of that will be even better. And so he's wasted the valuable time of his life in order to increase the basic material necessities of life obscenely, inordinately. And yet Prahlad Maharaj is saying you need to reduce the fever. You need to do whatever it takes to reduce the fever. If one has 103-degree temperature, one can easily die. So there's nothing that's valuable. You need to streamline things to save your life. That's the most important thing. I saw a little thing on the internet. A guy came up on the street and he said to the second person, he said, if I offered you $1 million right now, would you take it? And the man said, yes, of course I'd take it. And then the interviewer said, well, there's only one condition. What's that condition? Condition is that you won't wake up tomorrow morning. Would you still take the $1 million? He said, no. So your life, a day of your life, a moment of your life is worth more than millions and millions of dollars. So when the temperature is 103, when you're maddened and feverish with material, name, fame, property, wealth, sense gratification, the most important thing is to throw overboard, to get rid of anything, do whatever it takes to bring that fever down, to reduce your needs to the simple necessities of life. So Prahlad Maharaj tells his father, you need to do something to counterbalance the fever from which you suffer. And I think a good timeout, a good break would be for you to just walk away and go into the forest, at least for some time. Tatsaru mane surivari dehnam. My dear Father, best among the demons, all you've achieved with all of your so-called material success is that you're riddled with anxieties coming at you from every different point of the compass, taking every different conceivable shape. Thieves, government, your own self, animals, robbers, relatives. You need a timeout. You need to call a timeout. You need to get the fever down because you are in danger of the loss of your eternal soul. You've forgotten who you really are. And so you should give it up and go to the forest. And this advice, well-meaning, loving, sagacious advice, which Prahlad is giving to his father, is not taken very well by Hiranyakashipu. He tries, in fact, in retaliation to kill his very own son in a number of different ways. So we'll talk more about this subject matter tomorrow. But let me say that although Prahlad Maharaj advises his father to give up the dark well of family life and go into the forest and achieve a counterbalance measure of detachment, Prahlad himself, when he grows up, he gets married, he has children. And we'll talk about the difference. Prahlad is not saying not to get married, not to get children. In fact, I mentioned last week that of the 12 Mahajans, 6 of them are married. 6 of the greatest authorities in devotional service are married. And so the path to transcendence does not necessarily require or mandate renunciation, celibacy. It does not necessarily jettison married life. Just as there's engagement in material life, there's also a spiritual category of engagement. And we're going to talk more about how one can be immune to all the madness and all the anxieties of material acquisition by transferring the temper of one's consciousness, by transferring one's motives and one's focus in bhakti, devotional service to the Lord. So we'll leave that for mañana. Trying to grab a corner of the Facebook thing with my cursor, and it's not. Oh, here we go. We'll hear from Rob in a moment. Give Rob a moment to line up his verses. Anjali, she says, Hare Krishna and Danyavat Pranams, Caru, the postman, and by Bobby Mataji. Nice to have you on board. The queen of comments. We always get twice as many comments on the Facebook page. Thanks to Anjali when she joins. And John Malik is, no, he's not stingy with his comments either. The more comments, the more hearts, the more thumbs up, the more activity we have, the more likely we are to get the word out there in the Facebook world. Brent, Haribo, Brent, we had a huge crowd at our own Sunday feast last night. Brent was talking, answering questions. Jai Krishna was talking, answering questions. Joshua was talking. Every one of us had a group. I was being interviewed by a couple of girls, one of whom was a reporter from the Daily Universe. It was a really, really wonderful, probably 60, 70 people came, every one of which, at the end of the talk, I tell people when you go downstairs for dinner, I'm going to come around to you with one question. And they're like, what's that one question? I say, I'm going to ask all of you one question. And my one question to you will be, do you have any questions? Prabhupada used to do that. Instead of just preaching to people, the best thing is, do you have any questions? What is on your mind? How can Krishna consciousness solve one of your problems? It's not going to be as effective just to preach at people. You need some insight into them, where they're at, what they're struggling with, what they're curious about. And that way you're actually talking to the person as an individual, which will be very effective and be much appreciated. Too many devotees they have this thing they recite to people, and it might hit the mark, but it's kind of like, pin the tail in the donkey, or blindfold, and you're just kind of guessing where the donkey might be. Why would you do that when you can get the donkey? I'm just using this as a metaphor. No offense intended. Why do that when you could get the subject to unveil for you what it is that they're concerned about? How much time and effort is saved if you can just get to the right topic, or get some insight into that person's heart, who they are, what they're struggling with. So I never just start preaching to people. I always try to bring out certain details about their lives, certain facts. And if possible, I try to find out what they're being challenged with. Oftentimes people will reveal to a total stranger issues and challenges in their lives that they won't even talk about with their best friend or their wives. Be surprised some of the intimate, deep-reaching conversations I've had with people that just walked in the door, that I've never seen them before. They've never seen me. I'll never see them again. They'll never see me again. But they've taken advantage of the presence of a total stranger to unburden themselves with issues and things that have been troubling them. And I love trying to help out people. I'm 77 years old. I've been around for a while. I've been married. I don't have any children. I don't have much advice in the area of raising children. But in other areas, not only have I been around long enough, I've got a good track record with marriage, but giving motivational talks for over 50 years, I think I can get a handle on pretty much anything that's troubling anybody. So I tell people during the 1 hour program up in the temple room, we move things along. We don't want to belabor you or prolong people. We want first-time comers to get an idea of what Krishna consciousness is, and not browbeat them with a lecture and interminable questions. But I tell people, when we go downstairs for the dinner, for the prasadam meal, I'm going to circulate from table to table, and I'm going to ask you one question. That question is, what is your question? So if you see me online or in person, don't be surprised if I just say one thing. What questions do you have? So bring your questions. That's what I'm all about. I don't have that much time left in this lifetime. So if I can impart any sort of shred of wisdom to younger people who have more of a future in this lifetime ahead of me, that is going to be my great satisfaction and my great joy. Of course, all old people want to do that, but unfortunately, they may not have lived their life very profitably, and they may not have any good advice to give people. But if you're a disciple of Prabhupada, and if you've intersected the Krishna consciousness movement in any way, shape, or form, read the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, you have valuable information to pass on. In fact, you have a duty, an obligation, a responsibility to pass on what you know before you move on. Anyway, thank you, Anjali, for joining. John Malik, Brent, Shali Shirley, Hare Krishna, Shukshma. That sunset going on behind you. Let me grab my sunglasses. This is actually the sunrise. What's behind me is the eastern sky, and that's exactly what the sky looks like in the mornings when the sun is rising over the Wasatch Mountains. Govinda Dev, Hare Krishna. Karen Stamminger, Hare Krishna. Vinod, my old friend Vinod Kapoor, Hare Krishna. Vinod. When I was the membership director in Los Angeles, Vinod lived in Pasadena. I don't know if he still lives in Pasadena or not. Carmen, good morning. Hare Krishna, Carmen. Yes, Anjali is excited about Jamil coming. I'm picking him up. In fact, I have to leave. It's coming at 10:25, so I have to leave pretty soon for the airport. Sundari Priya, all glories to Prabhupada. Bipin Shah, Haribol Bipin, Pragna's brother. Anjali says cryptically, overnight the loyalty shifted from me to this newcomer. Overnight the loyalty shifted from me to this newcomer. Anyway, something I said, I forget. Natasha, good morning. Thanks for Thanks for supporting us on Patreon, Natasha. Hope that you enjoy the poems and the lectures and the transcripts that we send you on a weekly basis. Larry said that when he was in Africa, Larry spent many years with the Coast Guard and traveled the world. Said the monkeys would come steal all their stuff. Yes. And Anjali quotes, it says, the worst thing about living without Krishna consciousness is that you come not to be able to even trust yourself. And Anjali really inflates, blessedly, she inflates the comments. Okay, here's some rhyme from Carmen. The barrage of sense pleasure is a mirage of God's treasure. The goal you deserve is to let the soul serve. Beautiful. Sublime. Here it is. The barrage of sense pleasure is a mirage of God's treasure. The goal you deserve is to let the soul serve. A lot in there. That's what I like about poetry. It's very condensed. You can read it over and over and get newer meanings out of each recitation. The barrage of sense pleasure is a mirage of God's treasure. The goal you deserve is to let the soul serve. Anjali says, 1 million for my life. Nice knowing you all. Govinda Dev says, everything you gather is just more than you can lose. Everything you gather is just more than you can lose. That bears some deep thought. John Malik says, every day accept new challenges. Don't stop growing. That was our subject last night of the Sunday Feast talk. Of the 12 Mahajans, 6 are married. The path of transcendence does not require celibacy. Thanks, Anjali. Chad Wheelwright, good morning. Chad says, ever since the cabin days, I have truly appreciated the fact that you always ask me, how are you? Do you have any questions? That's all I want to know. Do you have any questions? And if you don't have any questions, I'll start asking about your life so that I can find some path in to your heart, the things that you might be challenged by. Govinda Dev says we're raising many children, actually. Raising Krishna's children. Wow, a lot of comments. Mahaprabhu Das, right at the very end. Haribol. Okay, we turn to Ra on this Monday morning. What rhymes do you have for us?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Jai Ho.
All right. A growing ego is the trajectory that Maya uses effectively.
Very good.
The more advancement, the more attachment, making it harder to supplant with detachment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well spoken.
The more material propriety, the more anxiety. The more spiritual propriety, the more serenity.
Very good. Nail on the head.
In material advancement, anxiety is rampant. Practice detachment for peaceful enchantment.
Good. You're on a roll this morning.
Falling under Maya's spell is like falling in a covered well.
Yep. To the point.
Cool.
Please do send those to me. They're all exactly to the point of the talk today. Thank you very much for your realizations. Thanks to everyone. This has been the start of our week. We'll be back tomorrow, Transcendental Tuesday, and we're also counting down to the weekend when we have the biggest celebration of the season at our Salt Lake City temple, Diwali/Govardhan Puja, this coming Saturday, beginning from 6 p.m. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.